Have you ever poured your heart into something, a job application, a creative project, or even a relationship, only to hear that one word that can stop us in our tracks? No. That sting of rejection, sharp and sudden, can feel deeply personal, as if the world itself is telling us we're not enough. But what if I told you that rejection isn't the end of your story? What if it's actually the beginning of something far more powerful? Stoicism, an ancient philosophy practiced by emperors, thinkers, and everyday people for centuries, offers a radically different way of looking at setbacks. It teaches that rejection isn't something to be feared or avoided, it's an opportunity to grow, to strengthen your resolve, and to reclaim your inner power. This isn't about pretending the pain doesn't exist. It's about changing how we respond to it, shifting our perspective from victimhood to ownership. In this video, we're exploring 25 Stoic beliefs that can help you turn rejection into genuine strength. These aren't just abstract ideas, they're practical, time-tested principles that have guided people through some of life's toughest moments. Whether you're dealing with professional setbacks, personal disappointments, or moments when it feels like nothing is going your way, these teachings offer a way forward. A way to not just bounce back, but to bounce forward with more clarity, resilience, and quiet confidence than ever before. So if you're ready to transform how you face life's no's, you're in the right place. Let's begin. The first and perhaps most foundational belief is what the Stoics called the dichotomy of control. This is the simple but profound idea that some things are within our power and some things are not. Our own thoughts, our judgments, our impulses, our desires, our actions, these are entirely up to us. They are our internal world, but everything else, the opinions of other people, the outcomes of our efforts, our reputation, our wealth, even our health, these are external events. They are not entirely within our command, no matter how much we wish they were. Now think about a moment of rejection. When you receive that no, what parts of that experience truly belong to you? Your effort, your preparation, your courage in putting yourself out there. That was all within your control, and that is where your worth is truly measured. The actual decision, however, the other person's choice, the final outcome, that sits squarely in the category of things you cannot control. It is an external event like the weather. You wouldn't feel personally insulted by a sudden rainstorm, would you? The Stoics argue we should view rejection with that same kind of detached clarity. It doesn't rain because you are undeserving. It rains because of conditions in the atmosphere. Similarly, a rejection often has far more to do with the other person's internal conditions, their needs, their biases, their own limitations, than it does with your inherent value. Applying this belief completely reframes the experience. Instead of internalizing the no as a verdict on your worth, you see it for what it is, an event that happened, not a definition of who you are. This isn't about becoming cold or emotionless. It's about wisely directing your emotional energy away from things you cannot change and toward the one thing you always can, your response. The pain might still come, Stoicism doesn't deny that, but you are freed from the additional, self-inflicted suffering of rumination, shame, and bitterness. You can acknowledge the sting, then gently return your focus to your own actions, your own character, the parts of life you can actually influence. This shift is the first and most critical step in turning rejection from a personal attack into a neutral event, and that is where your real power begins. Now, building on that foundation of focusing only on what we can control, we arrive at a second, even more transformative Stoic belief, Amor Fati. This Latin phrase translates to a love of one's fate. It's the profound practice of not just accepting what happens, but embracing it wholeheartedly and without reservation. This includes rejection, failure, and every unforeseen setback. The Stoic philosopher Epictetus, born into slavery, famously said, "Do not seek for events to happen as you wish, but wish for events to happen as they do." Marcus Aurelius, the emperor who faced countless betrayals and wars, wrote in his private journal, A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything that is thrown into it. That is the spirit of Amor Fati. It's about deciding to be that fire, to use every single experience, especially the painful ones, as fuel for your own growth. This goes far beyond mere acceptance. Acceptance can sometimes feel passive, like reluctantly tolerating a situation you dislike. Amor Fati is active and radical. It's about looking at a rejection letter, a failed project, or a broken relationship and genuinely finding a reason to be grateful for it. You might ask, how is that even possible? It begins with a shift in perspective. Instead of seeing the event as a roadblock on your intended path, you start to see it as the redirection you actually needed. Perhaps that job you didn't get would have trapped you in a role that stifled your creativity. Maybe that personal rejection saved you from a far greater heartbreak down the line. The Stoics believed that the universe is an interconnected, rational whole, and that everything that occurs is part of a larger, beneficial pattern, even if we can't see the entire tapestry from our limited viewpoint. History is filled with powerful examples of this principle in action. Thomas Edison, upon watching his laboratory burn to the ground after years of work, famously said, "There is great value in disaster. All our mistakes are burned up. Thank God we can start anew." He didn't just accept the disaster, he found an opportunity within it. He loved his fate. More recently, consider J.K. Rowling, who faced profound rejection as a single mother living on welfare, with her manuscript for Harry Potter being turned down by 12 different publishers. She could have seen that string of no's as a final verdict on her worth as a writer. Instead, she persevered, and each rejection arguably strengthened her resolve and refined her pitch until she found the one yes that changed everything. She embraced her difficult fate and used it as the raw material for her success. Applying Amor Fati to rejection transforms it from a stumbling block into a stepping stone. When you actively love your fate, you stop asking, "Why did this happen to me?" and start asking, "What can this make of me?" This question is incredibly empowering. It moves you from a position of victimhood to one of agency. The rejection itself becomes a valuable part of your journey, a necessary lesson that teaches you resilience, clarifies your goals, or forces you to innovate. It's not about pretending the experience is pleasant, it's about trusting that it is purposeful. By loving your fate, including every single no, you disarm rejection of its power to derail you. You welcome it as a tough but invaluable teacher, and in doing so, you unlock a deeper, more resilient form of power that is entirely your own. This brings us to a third, and perhaps the most liberating Stoic belief, the idea that virtue is the sole good. For the Stoics, the only thing that is truly, unquestionably good is an excellent character, the cultivation of wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance within ourselves. Conversely, the only thing that is truly bad is vice, a flawed and weak character. Everything else, money, fame, social status, and yes, even acceptance or rejection, falls into the category of indifference. These external things are not inherently good or bad. Their value depends entirely on how we use them. A large sum of money is neither good nor evil until it is used either wisely and generously or foolishly and selfishly. The same logic applies to rejection. When you internalize this belief, your entire definition of success and failure is turned inside out. Success is no longer measured by the outcome you receive, but by the quality of the effort you gave. Did you act with integrity? Did you prepare with diligence? Did you treat others with fairness and respect throughout the process? If the answer is yes, then you have already succeeded, regardless of the final result. The rejection itself becomes a mere external event, an indifferent that has no power to diminish your moral victory. In fact, a rejection can even serve to highlight and strengthen your virtue. It tests your resolve. It asks the question, will you remain courageous and just even when you are not rewarded for it? Will you persevere with wisdom and self-control when the easy path would be to become bitter or to compromise your principles? Consider the process of applying for a highly competitive job. You research meticulously, tailor your application with care, and present yourself in the interview with honesty and confidence. You act with the virtues of wisdom in your preparation and courage in putting yourself forward. The company, however, chooses another candidate for reasons entirely outside your control. Perhaps an internal candidate was favored, or the role's requirements shifted at the last minute. The Stoic view is that you won. You succeeded the moment you completed your virtuous effort. The rejection letter doesn't erase that success. It simply changes the external circumstances. Your character, your virtue, remains intact and is even polished through the experience. You prove to yourself that you can do hard things with integrity. This perspective is incredibly empowering because it places the judge of your worth firmly in your own hands. You are no longer waiting for external validation, a hiring manager's approval, a publisher's acceptance, a potential partner's yes, to feel like you are enough. Your sense of self-worth becomes built on the unshakable foundation of your own character, something that no one can ever take from you. When rejection comes, you don't crumble because your core identity isn't tied to the outcome. You can look at the situation and say, I acted rightly, I did my best, therefore I have nothing to regret. This isn't a consolation prize, it is the entire point of the endeavor. The goal shifts from winning approval to living virtuously, and in that shift, you discover a profound and lasting form of power that is completely immune to the word no. This brings us to a fourth powerful Stoic belief, one that takes the concept of embracing fate and pushes it into immediate, practical action, the idea that the obstacle is the way. This famous phrase, which has become a modern mantra for resilience, captures a core Stoic principle with breathtaking simplicity. It means that the very barrier standing in your path isn't a detour from your journey, it is the journey itself. The rejection, the setback, the unexpected no, these aren't just things to be accepted and loved from a distance. They are the raw materials you are meant to use to build your success. The path to your goal doesn't go around the obstacle. It goes directly through it by transforming that obstacle into the very tool you need to move forward. This mindset completely reframes the purpose of a challenge. A Stoic doesn't ask, why is this happening to me? But rather, how can I use this? The obstacle becomes a gymnasium for the mind, a place to train and strengthen your virtues. A rejection is no longer a stop sign. It's an invitation to practice courage by persevering, to practice wisdom by analyzing what you can improve, and to practice creativity by finding a new approach. Marcus Aurelius put it perfectly when he wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. The block is the path." The Roman emperor wasn't just theorizing. He was writing these words on the front lines of a brutal war, using the immense stress and chaos as his personal training ground for virtue. He was actively using the obstacle as his way. We see this principle vividly at work in the stories of great inventors and creators. Thomas Edison's quest to create a practical electric light bulb is a classic example. He didn't experience a single clean failure. He faced over 10,000 unsuccessful attempts, 10,000 tiny rejections from the laws of physics and chemistry. A reporter once asked him how it felt to fail so many times. Edison's legendary reply embodies the Stoic spirit. I have not failed 10,000 times. I have successfully found 10,000 ways that will not work. Each failed filament, each burnt-out prototype was not a reason to quit, it was data. It was a teacher. Each obstacle in his path directly showed him the next step on his way. The obstacle-repeated failure wasn't blocking his progress, it was systematically building his eventual world-changing success. Similarly, consider the journey of author J.K. Rowling. Before Harry Potter became a global phenomenon, her manuscript was rejected by 12 different publishing houses. For a writer, there are few obstacles more personal and disheartening than having your creative work, a piece of your inner world, consistently deemed not good enough. Rowling could have viewed those 12 rejection letters as 12 final verdicts. Instead, she chose to see them as 12 pieces of feedback, 12 reasons to refine her approach and strengthen her resolve. The obstacle, the closed doors of the publishing world, forced her to persevere, to believe in her story even when no one else did. That very perseverance became the way. The 13th submission was accepted, and the rest is history. The rejections didn't block her path. They forged the resilience that would be essential for handling the immense fame and pressure that followed. Applying this belief to your own life means developing a kind of creative, solution-oriented stubbornness. When you face a professional rejection, the Stoic question isn't, "Was I good enough?" but "What does this free me to do next?" or "What skill does this reveal I need to develop?" A rejection from a graduate program might be the obstacle that pushes you to gain real-world experience, making you a far stronger candidate later. A failed business venture becomes the way you learn invaluable lessons about finance and marketing that your successful competitors had to learn the hard way too. The obstacle presents you with a new set of conditions, and your job is to play brilliantly within them, to find the opportunity hidden within the constraint. By treating every no not as a full stop but as a comma, a pause that forces you to reassess and redirect your energy, you stop fighting your reality and start working with it. You begin to see that the way forward was never about avoiding difficulty, but about engaging with it so fully that you emerge on the other side stronger, wiser, and more capable than you ever could have been without it. This brings us to a fifth Stoic belief, one that might seem counterintuitive at first but is incredibly effective at stripping rejection of its emotional power: Premeditatio Malorum, or the premeditation of evils. This isn't about pessimism or dwelling on negative outcomes. It's a proactive mental exercise, a form of psychological inoculation. The practice involves deliberately and vividly imagining the potential setbacks, failures, and evils that could befall you in any given endeavor. You mentally walk through the worst-case scenario, not to scare yourself into inaction, but to desensitize yourself to its sting and to prepare your response in advance. By willingly confronting the possibility of rejection before it happens, you rob the actual event of its element of surprise and its capacity to trigger a panicked, emotional reaction. Think of it like a fire drill. We don't conduct fire drills because we expect the building to burn down. We do them so that if the alarm ever sounds, our response is practiced, calm, and rational instead of frantic and fear-driven. Premeditatio Malorum is a fire drill for the mind. When you are about to ask for a promotion, submit a piece of art, or ask someone on a date, you take a few moments to seriously contemplate, what is the worst that could realistically happen? The answer is rarely a cataclysm. The worst is often a simple, straightforward no. You then visualize yourself receiving that no and playing out the subsequent events with a stoic calm. You imagine yourself hearing the rejection, acknowledging the brief disappointment, and then calmly carrying on with your day, your composure intact and your self-worth unchallenged. You see yourself accepting the outcome as an external event and immediately refocusing on the next step. The immense power of this practice lies in the gap it creates between the event and your reaction. When rejection arrives unexpectedly, it often triggers a raw, primal emotional response: shock, shame, anger. But when you have premeditated it, the event feels familiar, almost expected. It's a scenario you have already lived through in your mind and navigated successfully. The actual rejection becomes a mere rehearsal of a scene you've already mastered, allowing you to respond with a clarity and steadiness that would otherwise be impossible. The Roman philosopher Seneca, one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome, would regularly practice poverty. He would sleep on a hard bed, wear coarse clothing, and eat only the most basic food for a set period. He wasn't punishing himself, he was proving to his own psyche that even the loss of his immense fortune would not be a true evil, but a manageable circumstance. He was ensuring that his happiness was not dependent on his external conditions. By mentally accepting the worst possible outcome, he made himself fearless. You can apply this directly to the fear of rejection. Before sending that important email, pause and say to yourself, the most likely response will be silence or a polite refusal. That's okay, it does not change my plan. I will send it, and if I hear nothing back by next week, my calm and rational response will be to follow up once or simply move on to the next opportunity. This rehearsal transforms the experience. The potential rejection shifts from a terrifying unknown to a manageable, planned-for possibility. The anxiety that normally paralyzes us, the what-if, loses its grip because you've already answered the question. You've already lived through the what-if in your mind and seen that you will not only survive, but you will do so with your dignity and virtue firmly in place. This practice builds a profound resilience, turning the anticipation of pain into a controlled exercise in mental strength that prepares you to meet any outcome with unwavering calm. Building on the powerful practice of mentally preparing for setbacks, we find a sixth Stoic belief that redefines where we place our sense of accomplishment: the unwavering focus on process over outcomes. This principle asks us to shift our entire sense of reward from the external result, which is never fully in our hands, to the internal quality of our own efforts, which always are. The Stoics argued that the only thing that truly belongs to us is our intention and our action, the work we do, the ethics we uphold, the diligence we apply. The final product, the acceptance letter, the signed contract, the yes, these are external events, and tying our happiness to them is like tying our happiness to the weather. It's a recipe for constant frustration, but when we take pride and find satisfaction in the process itself, we build a self-esteem that is completely bulletproof against rejection. Think about two different people applying for the same dream job. The first applicant is entirely outcome-focused. Their entire sense of self-worth is hitched to getting an offer. They prepare, they interview, but their mind is constantly on the prize, the validation, the title. When the rejection email arrives, their entire world crumbles a little. They didn't just lose a job opportunity, they feel they failed as a person because their effort only had value if it ended in success. Now consider the second applicant who embraces the Stoic focus on process. Their goal is to execute a flawless application process. They find satisfaction in thoroughly researching the company, in crafting thoughtful answers to potential questions, in presenting themselves with authenticity and courage during the interview. For this person, the moment they click send on the application or walk out of the interview room, they have already won. They achieved their goal, which was to act with excellence. The hiring decision is now in the hands of others. It is an external event. If an offer comes, it is a welcome addition. If a rejection comes, it is disappointing, but it does not negate the personal victory they have already achieved. Their self-worth remains intact because it was never on the line to begin with. This belief is incredibly liberating in areas like creative work or personal relationships, where rejection feels most personal. An artist who focuses on outcome might create work they think will sell or be praised, and a negative review can devastate their desire to create. But an artist focused on process creates for the love of the craft, for the personal satisfaction of expressing an idea perfectly. The act of creation itself is the reward. The publication or the gallery showing is a potential bonus, but their core identity as an artist is secure because it is rooted in the daily practice, not the public reception. Similarly, expressing romantic feelings to someone is fraught with the fear of rejection. An outcome-focused person will only consider it a success if their feelings are reciprocated. This makes the act of being vulnerable incredibly risky. A process-focused person, however, redefines success. The successful act is having the courage to be honest and vulnerable, to honor their feelings by expressing them. They have controlled what they can control, their own integrity and bravery. The other person's response is their own to make. This shift doesn't eliminate the hope for a yes, but it completely removes the terror of a no, because the no does not diminish the courage it took to try. This philosophy empowers us to take more intelligent risks, to innovate, and to pursue truly ambitious goals without the paralyzing fear of failure. When the stakes are only about the outcome, we tend to play it safe, to only attempt things where success seems guaranteed. But when the stakes are about the quality of our effort, we are freed to try anything. The potential for rejection becomes irrelevant because the value was in the attempt itself. Every endeavor becomes a chance to practice virtue, to be courageous by trying, to be wise in our preparation, to be just in our conduct. The outcome is merely the aftermath. By investing our identity in our actions rather than our achievements, we ensure that no single rejection letter, failed project, or unanswered message can ever define us. We are what we do repeatedly with integrity, not what the world occasionally gives us in return. This relentless focus on our own actions naturally leads us to the seventh core Stoic belief, the transformative practice of self-reflection and continuous improvement. The Stoics were not just philosophers of grand ideas. They were pragmatists who built specific daily routines to turn philosophy into lived experience. One of the most powerful of these routines was a practice of rigorous yet compassionate evening self-examination. This isn't about dwelling on mistakes with regret, but about dissecting the day's events with the calm curiosity of a scientist studying data. Every interaction, every effort, and especially every rejection becomes a source of invaluable feedback when you make time to review it honestly. Imagine ending your day by quietly asking yourself a series of Stoic questions, as Marcus Aurelius did in his private writings. What did I do well today? Where did my actions not align with my values? What could I have done differently? When applied to a rejection, this shifts the entire narrative. Instead of simply feeling the sting of a no, you engage with it proactively. You might reflect, in that interview, was my answer to the second question truly thoughtful, or was it rushed? Did I fully listen to the other person's concerns, or was I too focused on my own agenda? Was my proposal as clear and compelling as it could have been? This line of questioning is fundamentally different from self-blame. Blame says, I am a failure. Reflection asks, what specific element of my approach could be improved? One traps you in the past, the other empowers you for the future. The immense power of this practice is that it actively converts pain into progress. A rejection left unexamined is just a wound, but a rejection that is reflected upon becomes a lesson, a masterclass in what works and what doesn't. Perhaps you realize that you've been applying for roles that don't truly leverage your unique strengths, and the repeated no's are a signal to recalibrate your target. Maybe a pattern of personal rejections reveals a need to work on your communication skills or emotional availability. The rejection itself becomes the raw material for building a wiser, more effective version of yourself. This is how you build genuine personal power over time, not by avoiding setbacks, but by mining each one for its hidden insights. This process requires a delicate balance between honest accountability and self-compassion. The Stoic aim is to judge your actions, not your worth. It's the difference between saying, that specific behavior was unskillful, and I am unskillful. The first is a critique that leads to growth. The second is an attack that leads to shame. The goal of Stoic reflection is to identify the gap between your intentions and your actions so you can close it next time. By doing this consistently, you ensure that no experience, no matter how painful, is ever wasted. Each no becomes a stepping stone, not because it feels good, but because you have a system in place to extract its value, steadily compounding your wisdom and resilience with every challenge you face. This brings us to an eighth, profoundly liberating Stoic belief, the the critical practice of detaching from external validation. For all the pain that rejection inflicts, its deepest sting comes from a single source, our deep-seated, often unconscious craving for approval from others. We hand over the keys to our self-worth, allowing a hiring manager's decision, a publisher's letter, or a potential partner's response to act as the final verdict on our value. The Stoics identified this dependency as a primary cause of human misery and a fundamental weakness. They argued that when your sense of stability is tied to the fickle and unpredictable opinions of other people, you are building your house on shifting sand. Every gust of wind, every no, threatens to topple your entire structure. The alternative is to build your foundation on the solid rock of inner validation. This means shifting the source of your approval from outside yourself to within. And the only reliable inner metric the Stoics recognized was virtue, your own commitment to acting with wisdom, courage, justice, and self-discipline. Your question changes from "do they approve of me" to "did I act in a way I can approve of?" This is the essence of self-reliance. It's not about becoming arrogant or dismissing all feedback. It's about making your core identity independent of it. When you know you have acted with integrity, prepared diligently, and been courageous in your attempt, you have already passed your own test. Any external approval that follows is a welcome bonus, but its absence cannot negate the inner accomplishment. Cultivating this self-reliance is a practice, and it begins with setting your own personal standards of success, completely independent of the outcome. Before any important endeavor, define what a win looks like for you, based solely on your own efforts and character. For instance, if you have a crucial presentation, your personal standard for success might be, "I will be thoroughly prepared, speak with clarity and conviction, and handle any questions with honesty and grace." If you achieve that, you have succeeded. The client's decision to go with another vendor or the mixed reviews from the audience become separate data points. They might offer useful information for next time, but they do not define the success of this effort. You have already met your own standard. This simple act of predefining your victory based on controllable actions creates a psychological fortress. Rejection might knock on the door, but it cannot get inside because you are already celebrating your win. This detachment makes rejection far less impactful, transforming it from a devastating personal critique into a simple data point. It becomes less about you and more about the situation, a mismatch of needs, timing, or perspective. When a rejection arrives, instead of spiraling into self-doubt, you can hold it up against your personal standard. You can ask calmly, "Did I meet my own criteria for a good effort?" If the answer is yes, the rejection loses its power to harm you. It becomes a reminder, perhaps even a welcome one, to stay true to your own compass and not to outsource your self-worth. If the answer is no, and you recognize you could have prepared better or acted more virtuously, then the rejection becomes a valuable teacher, highlighting an area for genuine personal growth that you can address next time. In either case, you remain in the driver's seat of your own emotional life, empowered and stable, no longer at the mercy of the world's ever-changing opinions. Building on this foundation of inner-directed validation, we arrive at a ninth Stoic belief that serves as the essential tool for maintaining that hard-won equilibrium: the profound practice of mindfulness and present-moment awareness. While the term mindfulness often feels modern, its core principle is deeply embedded in Stoic philosophy. The Stoics understood that our greatest suffering rarely comes from the actual event of rejection itself, but from where our minds choose to dwell afterward, replaying the painful moment on a loop in the past, or projecting it forward into a future filled with anxiety about it happening again. This mental time travel amplifies a single no into a seemingly endless pattern of failure, stealing our peace and paralyzing our progress. The Stoic antidote is to rigorously train our attention to remain firmly anchored in the present, the only moment where we actually have any agency. Marcus Aurelius offered himself this simple yet powerful reminder: don't let your imagination be crushed by life as a whole. stick with the situation at hand. This is the essence of Stoic mindfulness. It's not about emptying the mind, but about fully engaging with the current task, the current conversation, the current breath. When a rejection occurs, the mindful Stoic acknowledges the initial sting of disappointment, a natural present moment sensation, but then gently refuses the mind's inevitable pull to build grand, catastrophic stories around it. They don't deny the feeling, they simply don't fuel it with narratives about what it means for their entire life or identity. They feel the disappointment, observe it with a kind of detached curiosity, and then, because the event is now in the past, they return their focus to what is right in front of them, the next step, the next project, the next opportunity to act virtuously. The Stoics developed specific, practical techniques to cultivate this ability, many of which align perfectly with modern mindfulness practices. One of the most powerful was daily journaling, not as a diary of events, but as a training ground for present-moment awareness. Each evening, they would review their day with calm objectivity, noting where their emotions were triggered and whether their reactions were proportionate to the actual events. This practice, much like a meditative reflection, grounds you in the reality of what actually happened, rather than the amplified story your anxiety might be telling. Another key technique was the discipline of voluntary discomfort, purposefully choosing to experience minor hardships like taking a cold shower or eating a simple meal. This wasn't masochism, it was a drill for the mind to practice fully accepting the present moment exactly as it is, without complaint or resistance, building the mental muscle to handle larger setbacks like rejection with the same calm acceptance. Applying this to the fear of rejection is transformative. Before a high-stakes meeting or a difficult conversation, instead of being lost in anxious fantasies about all the ways it could go wrong, you can anchor yourself in your senses, the feel of your feet on the floor, the sound of your own breath, the specific words being spoken right now. This doesn't guarantee a yes, but it guarantees that you will be fully present to respond to the situation with clarity and composure rather than reacting from a place of fear. And when rejection does come, mindfulness allows you to process it as a single event, not a life sentence. You can note the thought, "That was a rejection," without adding, "which means I'm a failure and will never succeed." By containing the experience to the present, you prevent it from colonizing your past and future, freeing up immense mental energy that would have been wasted on rumination and redirecting it toward constructive action. This brings us to a 10th, deeply grounding Stoic belief that can dissolve much of the fear and pain we attach to rejection: the profound acceptance of impermanence. The Stoics observed that everything in the universe is in a constant state of flux. Everything is temporary. Relationships, jobs, opportunities, successes, and even our own lives are not fixed, permanent possessions, but rather fleeting experiences on a long and ever-changing river. When we truly internalize this reality, our grip on specific outcomes naturally loosens. We begin to understand that a rejection isn't a permanent scar on our destiny. It is simply the natural conclusion of one particular possibility, making way for the next one to flow in. This perspective doesn't make us cold or detached from life. Instead, it allows us to engage with it more fully, appreciating each moment without the crippling anxiety of trying to make it last forever. Think about a river. You can never step into the same river twice, as the water is always moving, always changing. Now, imagine an opportunity is like a single, beautiful leaf floating on that river. You see it coming toward you and you reach out to grab it. Sometimes your hand closes around it, but often the current might sweep it just beyond your grasp, or a breeze might push it toward someone else downstream. The Stoic view is that it is futile to stand frozen at the riverbank, mourning the loss of that one specific leaf. The river is still flowing, and it is carrying countless other leaves, each unique and potentially even more suited to you. The rejection of that one opportunity is simply the river doing what it does, moving, changing, and bringing new things. Your job is not to curse the current, but to stay present and ready for what comes next, trusting that the flow of life is not personal. This belief is powerfully illustrated in the Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, which finds beauty in imperfection and acceptance in transience. A ceramic bowl that breaks is not discarded. It is repaired with gold lacquer, with the cracks known as kintsugi becoming a celebrated part of its history, making it more unique and more beautiful than it was before. In the same way, a rejected proposal, a failed business, or a lost job is a crack in the vessel of our plans. We can choose to see it as a ruin, or we can choose, like a Stoic artisan, to fill those cracks with the gold of our resilience and wisdom. The breakage is not denied. It is incorporated into our story, becoming a permanent part of our strength without being a permanent wound. The acceptance of impermanence teaches us that endings are not failures. They are necessary transitions that allow for new and often better beginnings. Applying this to daily life means reframing how we approach our goals and attachments. When you go into a job interview holding the belief that this is the one perfect, permanent role for you, the stakes feel unbearably high. The potential for rejection becomes terrifying because it feels like the end of your only chance. But when you approach it with an understanding of impermanence, your perspective shifts. You see it as a possibility, one of many you will encounter throughout your long and evolving career. You can still give it your full effort and hope for the best, but you do so with the quiet knowledge that if it doesn't work out, it wasn't meant to be your path right now. The river will bring another. This doesn't foster apathy, it fosters a powerful and adaptable resilience. It allows you to bounce back from setbacks not with a sense of starting over from scratch, but with the confidence of someone who knows that change is the only constant and that new opportunities are always forming just around the next bend. You learn to flow with life rather than fight against its current, and in that surrender to what is, you find a truly unshakable sense of peace. This brings us to an 11th Stoic belief that directly addresses the stories we tell ourselves about why we were rejected. The profound practice of viewing situations through the lens of justice and fairness. In the Stoic framework, justice is one of the 4 cardinal virtues, and it extends far beyond the courtroom. It encompasses our duty to treat others with fairness, and just as importantly, to judge their actions toward us with a similar sense of equitable understanding. This means consciously recognizing that another person's decision to reject us is rarely, if ever, a calculated personal attack. Far more often, it is the result of their own unique perspective, their own limitations, their own internal struggles, or simply a misalignment of needs that has absolutely nothing to do with our inherent worth. When we feel the sting of a no, our initial, raw emotional response is often to personalize it. We craft a narrative where we are the wronged protagonist and the rejecter is the villain acting out of spite or malice. This story feels true in the moment, but it is almost always a fiction that we build to make sense of the pain. The Stoic practice of justice asks us to deconstruct this narrative and replace it with a more truthful and far more peaceful interpretation. Instead of asking, "Why did they do this to me?" we learn to ask, "What might have led them to this decision?" This shift isn't about making excuses for others. It's about seeking a clearer, less self-centered understanding of reality. It is an act of intellectual fairness that actively drains the poison of bitterness from the wound of rejection. Consider a practical example from the professional world. You receive a generic rejection email after a final round interview for a job you were incredibly excited about. The personalizing narrative whispers, "They didn't like me. I wasn't good enough. The interviewer must have thought my answer was stupid." This story is corrosive and leads to shame and self-doubt. Now apply the Stoic virtue of justice. You might instead reflect, the hiring manager is likely under immense pressure from leadership to fill this role with a very specific type of candidate. Perhaps an internal applicant decided to apply at the last minute, changing the entire dynamic. Maybe the company's budget for the role was suddenly cut, and they had to choose a less experienced candidate they could afford. Or it's possible that while my skills were strong, another candidate had a niche certification that was suddenly deemed critical. Each of these possibilities is not only plausible but highly common. And critically, none of them are a verdict on your value as a professional or as a person. They are simply the complex, behind-the-scenes realities of organizational life that you could not see. This practice becomes even more powerful and healing in the realm of personal relationships. Being rejected by someone you care for deeply can feel like the ultimate personal indictment. The narrative of injustice is loud and painful. If I were more attractive, smarter, or funnier, they would have chosen me. The Stoic lens of justice encourages a much wider, more compassionate view. It asks you to consider, this person is on their own journey with their own history, their own fears, and their own unmet needs. Their decision might stem from their own insecurity. Perhaps they feel unworthy of a good relationship and are subconsciously sabotaging it. Maybe they are not in a place emotionally to offer the commitment I desire. Their perception of compatibility is based on a million factors I know nothing about, from childhood experiences to their vision of a future partner. Seeing the situation through this lens does not erase the sadness, but it does eliminate the debilitating sense of personal injustice. It allows you to release the narrative that you were unfairly wronged and instead see it as two paths diverging, not because one path was bad, but because they were simply meant to go in different directions. By consciously adopting this perspective of fairness, we accomplish something remarkable. We transform rejection from a painful personal attack into a neutral event. It becomes less about us and more about the complex interplay of circumstances, perspectives, and human limitations that are an inherent part of life. This doesn't require you to become a pushover or to deny your feelings. It simply means choosing a more accurate and far less painful story. It is an act of profound self-care that protects your peace of mind and prevents you from carrying the heavy baggage of resentment. When you judge the situation justly, you free yourself from the trap of bitterness and open your heart to the next opportunity with empathy and understanding, rather than cynicism and fear. This brings us to a 12th Stoic belief that cuts straight to the heart of why rejection is so difficult to handle: the essential courage to face discomfort. While many philosophies might advise us to simply avoid pain, Stoicism takes the radically opposite approach. It teaches that true strength isn't forged in comfort and ease, but in the deliberate and willing embrace of life's inevitable hardships. Courage for the Stoics wasn't just about heroic acts on a battlefield. It was the everyday moral bravery required to endure emotional pain, to face social fears, and to willingly step into situations where rejection is a very real possibility. It is the virtue that allows us to say, "This might hurt, but it is necessary for my growth, so I will do it anyway." We see this valor embodied perfectly in the life of Seneca the Younger, one of Stoicism's most famous practitioners. Seneca was a man who reached the pinnacle of power and wealth as an advisor to Emperor Nero. Yet his life was far from easy. Early in his career, he was accused of adultery with the emperor's niece and was sentenced to exile on the island of Corsica for 8 long years. Exile in the ancient world was a form of social and professional death, a brutal, total rejection from the heart of society, your career, and everything you held dear. A lesser man might have crumbled into bitterness, railing against the injustice of his fate. But Seneca did the opposite. He chose to see his exile not as a punishment but as an opportunity. He used those 8 years of isolation and discomfort to deepen his philosophical studies, to write some of his most profound works, and to build an unshakable inner fortress that no external circumstance could breach. He later wrote, "A gem cannot be polished without friction, nor a man perfected without trials." His exile was his friction, and he had the courage to endure it, emerging not broken but polished and stronger than ever before. This same courage is the exact muscle we flex every time we risk rejection. asking for a raise, sharing a creative project, or being vulnerable in a relationship, these acts require us to willingly step into the arena of potential emotional discomfort. The Stoic doesn't see this as a foolish risk, but as a necessary training exercise for the soul. Each time you face the possibility of a no, you are essentially doing a rep for your courage muscle. The act itself, regardless of the outcome, is a victory because you have chosen to practice bravery over safety. You have chosen the potential for growth over the guaranteed comfort of staying silent. This repeated practice is what builds genuine mental toughness. The first time you face a rejection, the discomfort might feel overwhelming, but the 10th time, the 50th, you begin to develop a resilience, a knowing confidence that says, I have felt this feeling before, I have endured it, and I was okay. I can endure it again. The fear of the pain loses its power over you because you have proven to yourself through direct experience that you can handle it. This process masterfully transforms vulnerability from a weakness into your greatest source of inner strength. In a world that often tells us to protect ourselves at all costs, to build walls and never show our soft underbelly, the Stoic argument is counterintuitive and powerful. They propose that the only way to become invulnerable to the harm of rejection is to make yourself vulnerable to the experience of it. It is by willingly facing the thing we fear that we drain it of its terrifying power. The rejection itself is not the source of strength, the courage you muster to face it is. That courage becomes a part of you, a permanent internal resource that you can draw upon in any future challenge. By consistently choosing courage over comfort, you are not just collecting achievements, you are building a character that is confident, resilient, and ultimately free. You become someone who is no longer paralyzed by the fear of a no, because you know that whatever the answer is, you have the strength to meet it. Now, let's explore a 13th Stoic belief that might initially sound counterintuitive, but is one of the most effective psychological tools for building resilience: the art of negative visualization, a practice the Stoics called Premeditatio Malorum. This is not about pessimism or expecting the worst to happen. It is a deliberate exercise in gratitude and emotional preparedness. It involves periodically and vividly imagining the loss of the things we value most: our health, our job, our relationships, our comforts. By consciously contemplating the absence of these goods, we not only inoculate ourselves against the shock of potential loss, but more importantly, we reawaken a profound appreciation for having them in the first place. This practice makes our current circumstances feel richer and any future setbacks feel significantly smaller and more manageable. Imagine you are up for a major promotion, a role you have been working towards for years. The common, anxious approach is to fixate on the desired outcome, building up the potential for immense disappointment if it doesn't happen. Negative visualization offers a different path. Before the decision is made, you take a few quiet moments to seriously imagine not getting the promotion. You visualize the moment you receive the news. You feel the initial pang of disappointment, but then you continue the exercise. You picture yourself returning to your current role the next day. You mentally walk through the reality. You still have a job that provides for you and your family. You still have colleagues you respect. You still have the skills and experience that made you a candidate in the first place, and those cannot be taken away. By willingly visiting this potential reality in your mind, you accomplish two crucial things. First, you desensitize yourself to the sting of the rejection, making the actual event feel less like a catastrophic personal failure and more like a scenario you have already calmly navigated. Second, and perhaps more powerfully, you emerge from this mental exercise with a renewed sense of gratitude for the stable, good things you already possess, which the promotion was meant to enhance, not replace. The true power of this practice lies in its regular application to the fabric of daily life, not just major events. The Stoics encouraged making it a routine part of your reflection. While holding your child, you might briefly contemplate the fragility of life and how precious this ordinary moment truly is. While enjoying a meal with friends, you could pause to appreciate the health and companionship that allows for such joy, recognizing it is not a guaranteed constant. This isn't meant to breed a morbid fear of loss, but to create a vibrant, heightened awareness of the present. It's the difference between casually seeing a beautiful sunset and truly seeing it, with the conscious thought that you may never see one exactly like it again. This practice trains the mind to source its happiness from a deep appreciation of the present reality, rather than from the anxious anticipation of a future gain. When you make this a habit, the scale of your problems begins to shift. A rejected project proposal or a criticized idea no longer feels like a monumental disaster because your sense of well-being is anchored in a much broader foundation of gratitude. You have already spent time being thankful for your fundamental well-being, your core relationships, and your basic capabilities. Against that backdrop, a single professional setback is placed in its proper proportion. It is a disappointment, but it is not a threat to your entire existence or happiness. You can acknowledge the frustration while simultaneously holding onto the immense gratitude for everything else that is still going right in your life. This balanced perspective is the source of a remarkably positive and resilient outlook, allowing you to face rejection not as a devastated victim, but as a grounded and grateful individual who understands that this one no is merely a small part of a much larger and still beautiful picture. This brings us to a 14th Stoic belief that acts as a powerful strategy for building emotional fortitude, the conscious simplification of our desires and needs. At its core, Stoicism teaches that much of our suffering stems not from the events themselves, but from our attachments to specific outcomes and external things. The more we crave approval, status, or possession, the more vulnerable we become to the pain of losing them or being denied them. Think of it like this. If you have 100 different hooks in the water, each one represents a potential source of disappointment. A rejection from one job, one person, or one opportunity can feel like a devastating tug on that single line. But if you consciously choose to cast only a few essential hooks, if you narrow your focus to what is truly within your control and necessary for a virtuous life, then a single tug, while perhaps disappointing, cannot upend your entire boat. This practice of simplifying our attachments is about reducing the sheer number of vulnerabilities we have in the world, thereby making rejection a less frequent and less powerful visitor in our emotional lives. The Stoics were strong advocates for living simply, not as a form of self-punishing austerity, but as a practical exercise in freedom. By voluntarily reducing our dependence on luxury, extravagant comfort, and constant external validation, we prove to ourselves that our happiness is not contingent on these things. This is beautifully illustrated by the lifestyle of Cato the Younger, a Roman senator known for his unwavering Stoic principles. Despite being one of the wealthiest and most powerful men in Rome, Cato often chose to walk the streets barefoot, wore simple, old-fashioned clothing, and ate plain food. He wasn't trying to make a public show of his humility. He was engaging in a continuous personal drill. By regularly experiencing life without its luxuries, he was immunizing himself against the fear of losing them. He knew that if his political fortunes turned, if he was rejected by the Senate or the people, his core well-being would remain untouched because it was never built on those external pillars in the first place. His sense of self was rooted in his integrity, not his status, making him virtually impervious to the rejections and shifting allegiances of political life. We can apply this same principle directly to the fear of rejection by engaging in a modern form of this voluntary simplification. Start by conducting an honest audit of your desires. How much of your emotional energy is invested in craving a certain job title, a particular level of income, or the approval of a specific social circle? The Stoic practice asks us to question these attachments. Is that job title truly necessary for your survival and your ability to act virtuously, or is it primarily a source of status? Is that person's approval essential for your moral character, or is it a nice-to-have that you've mistakenly elevated to a must-have? By rigorously distinguishing between our needs and our wants, we begin to withdraw emotional investment from the vast category of wants. This doesn't mean you shouldn't pursue ambitious goals or desire meaningful connections. It means you pursue them with a light grip, understanding that your fundamental happiness and self-worth are not on the line. The goal becomes the virtuous effort of pursuit itself, not the specific outcome. When you implement this mindset, rejection transforms from a major crisis into a minor bump in the road. If your sense of security is tied to having $1 million in the bank, then a financial loss can feel catastrophic. But if your security is tied to your ability to live wisely and courageously with whatever you have, then a financial setback becomes a mere logistical challenge, an opportunity to practice resourcefulness. Similarly, if your self-esteem requires the constant approval of your peers, a single critical comment can ruin your week. But if your self-esteem is built on your own knowledge that you acted with honesty and kindness, then that criticism can be evaluated calmly for useful feedback and then let go if it offers none. Simplifying your desires is the ultimate act of building an internal citadel. It strengthens your walls so that the arrows of rejection simply bounce off, leaving the core of you, your character, your values, your peace, safe, secure, and entirely your own. The Stoics understood that we are not meant to walk the path of virtue alone, and this brings us to a 15th powerful belief: the deliberate and strategic use of role models for inspiration and guidance. In moments of doubt or deep disappointment, it can be incredibly difficult to see a way forward. Our own perspective becomes clouded by emotion, and our resolve can waver. The Stoics, practical as ever, had a solution for this. They would actively call upon the memory and example of individuals they admired, using these figures as a kind of moral and psychological compass to reorient themselves toward strength and wisdom. This practice wasn't about blind hero worship. It was about having a concrete blueprint for resilience, a living example of how to translate philosophy into action when the pressure is on. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the known world, constantly did this in his private writings. In his meditations, he doesn't just theorize about virtue, he directly invokes the names and qualities of those he sought to emulate. He recalls his adoptive father's unshakable integrity and his brother's gentle nature, but he looked further back, too, to legendary figures like Socrates, who faced a wrongful death sentence with profound calm, choosing to die for his principles rather than flee into a life of dishonor. By holding these examples in his mind, Marcus was essentially asking himself in moments of crisis, what would Antoninus Pius do now? How would Socrates handle this insult or this betrayal? This mental exercise provided him with a ready-made script for virtuous action, bypassing his initial, purely emotional reaction and accessing a deeper well of strength. You can apply this same technique with immense power when facing rejection. The key is to move beyond abstract ideals and find specific, relatable human beings whose stories resonate with your own struggles. Who are the people in history, in your field, or even in your personal life who have faced monumental setbacks and turned them into fuel for greatness? Perhaps it's a historical figure like Thomas Edison, who reframed 10,000 failed experiments not as rejections from nature but as valuable lessons. Maybe it's an artist like Vincent van Gogh, who, despite selling almost no paintings in his lifetime, never stopped creating, driven by an inner vision that was impervious to external validation. Or it could be a modern entrepreneur like Steve Jobs, who was famously fired from the very company he founded, only to return years later with renewed creativity and perspective to lead it to historic heights. The process is simple but profound. When you receive a rejection that stings, take a moment to consciously bring one of these role models to mind. Don't just think of their ultimate success. Actively consider their lowest point, their moment of rejection. Picture J.K. Rowling, a single mother on welfare, holding yet another rejection letter for her Harry Potter manuscript. Then trace the path forward from that exact moment. She didn't quit. She used that disappointment to refine her approach, to strengthen her resolve. Her story becomes a tangible map showing you that the path from no to yes is paved with perseverance. By connecting your small story to their larger narrative, your single rejection is placed in a new context. It is no longer an ending, but a potential beginning, a necessary chapter in a story of resilience that has been told countless times throughout history. This practice does something remarkable. It externalizes the blueprint for courage. You don't have to generate all the strength from within yourself in that moment of pain. You can borrow it from someone you admire. You can stand on the shoulders of giants who have already navigated this terrain. Their examples provide a living proof that rejection is not fatal, that comebacks are possible, and that power is often forged in the fires of adversity. By consciously building your own personal pantheon of heroes, you create an ever-present council of advisors ready to guide you, reminding you that you are not the first to face this challenge and that your response can become part of a legacy of resilience that inspires others in turn. But this process of finding role models and simplifying our desires all hinges on a crucial skill: the ability to see events clearly for what they are. This brings us to our 16th Stoic belief, the disciplined practice of rational evaluation. When rejection strikes, our first reaction is almost never rational. It's emotional. We feel the sting, and our minds instantly spin a story of personal failure, weaving that single event into a larger narrative of our own inadequacy. The Stoics identified this as the primary source of our suffering, not the event itself, but the judgment we place upon it. The antidote is to consciously interrupt this emotional hijacking with a series of logical, dispassionate questions designed to separate the raw facts from the painful fiction we're creating. Imagine receiving a brief, impersonal email informing you that your application was unsuccessful. The emotional interpretation screams, "They hated me. My work isn't good enough. I'll never get a job like that." This story feels true, but it is almost entirely invented. Rational evaluation asks you to step back and look only at the verifiable facts. Fact, you applied for a position. Fact, the company sent a standard message stating they will not be moving forward with your application. That is all. Everything else, the reasons why, the opinions of the hiring manager, the implication for your future, is pure speculation. The Stoic practice is to consciously strip away those layers of speculation and sit with the neutral, objective reality of the situation. It is a simple event that occurred, nothing more and nothing less. Once you've established the bare facts, you then engage in a Socratic dialogue with yourself, asking a series of purposeful questions to reframe the experience. The first and most powerful question is this truly bad, or is it merely inconvenient? We often conflate the two. A genuine evil in the Stoic sense would be an act that corrupts your character, acting dishonestly or with cowardice. A rejection does not fit that category. It is an external event that is inconvenient to your plans and perhaps disappointing to your hopes, but it does not damage your virtue. This simple distinction immediately lowers the emotional temperature. The next question is, what part of this is within my control? You controlled your preparation, your effort, and your decision to apply. You did not control the number of other applicants, the specific needs of the hiring manager that day, or the internal politics of the company. By categorizing these elements, you redirect your energy away from ruminating on the uncontrollables and back toward the things you can actually influence. The final and most growth-oriented question is, what data can I gather from this? This is where you transform rejection from a personal affront into a source of valuable feedback. Instead of asking, why did they reject me, which leads to stories, ask, what can I learn from this outcome? Maybe the data suggests you need to tailor your portfolio more closely to the industry. Perhaps it indicates that your interview answers could be more concise. It might even reveal that you've been targeting the wrong types of roles altogether. This objective analysis turns the situation into a puzzle to be solved rather than a wound to be nursed. You become a scientist studying an experiment that didn't yield the expected result, calmly adjusting your hypothesis for the next trial. By systematically applying this rational evaluation, you drain the event of its emotional power and reclaim your own cognitive clarity, ensuring that every setback, no matter how painful, contributes to your ultimate growth. This brings us to a 17th Stoic belief that serves as a powerful antidote to the pride that often magnifies the pain of rejection, the profound strength found in embracing humility. In a world that often equates confidence with never admitting fault, Stoicism offers a counterintuitive path. It teaches that true power isn't about stubbornly insisting on our own deservedness, but about cultivating the humility to accept a simple, liberating truth. We don't always know what's best for us, and we don't inherently deserve every single thing we want. This isn't about fostering low self-esteem. It's about developing an accurate and realistic self-assessment, freeing us from the arrogance that treats every rejection as a personal injustice and opens us up to the valuable lessons it might contain. Think of humility not as thinking less of yourself, but as thinking of yourself less. It's the ability to get your ego out of the way so you can see a situation with clear, objective eyes. When you approach an endeavor with this mindset, you can pour your entire effort into it while simultaneously holding the outcome lightly. You can think, I believe I am a strong candidate for this role, and I will act as if I deserve it, but I also accept that the hiring manager may have needs or perspectives I cannot see. My worth is not determined by their decision. This creates a healthy psychological distance. The potential rejection is no longer a verdict on your entire being. It is simply one person's or one organization's assessment of a fit at a specific moment in time. This humble acceptance of life's uncertainty is what allows you to engage fully without being shattered by the result. This humble stance becomes your greatest asset when feedback accompanies the rejection. Pride and a bruised ego will instinctively make us defensive. We might dismiss the criticism as coming from someone who just doesn't get it, or rationalize the failure by blaming external factors. Humility, however, allows us to lower our shields and truly listen. It allows us to ask the most empowering question possible. Even if I don't agree with all of it, what single piece of truth can I take from this to improve? Perhaps the rejection email includes a vague line like, we decided to move forward with a candidate whose experience more closely aligns with our current needs. A prideful reaction is to dismiss this as a meaningless corporate platitude. A humble reaction is to see it as a data point. It might prompt you to honestly assess if your resume could better highlight relevant skills or if you should be targeting a slightly different type of position. This openness transforms the rejection from a closed door into a signpost, pointing you toward a potential area for growth. History provides a powerful example of this principle in the story of Abraham Lincoln. Before his presidency, Lincoln's life was a long string of professional and political rejections. He failed in business, lost numerous elections for state and federal legislature, and was defeated in a campaign for the U.S. Senate. A proud man would have been broken by this relentless string of no's, seeing each as a public humiliation. But Lincoln possessed a deep sense of humility. He didn't see the voters' rejections as proof of his unworthiness. He saw them as feedback on his message and his strategy. After each loss, he would reflect, learn, adapt, and try again. He stayed open to what the electorate was telling him, refining his approach until he finally found the right message for the right office at the right time. His humility, his willingness to accept that he might need to change, was the very thing that allowed him to eventually succeed on a historic scale. By consciously practicing this Stoic virtue, you turn humility into a superpower. It becomes the flexible, resilient core that allows you to bend without breaking in the face of life's inevitable no's. You stop wasting energy on railing against outcomes you cannot change and start investing it in the one thing you can always control, your willingness to learn and evolve. A rejection is no longer a reason to feel defeated, but an invitation to become better. It is the tough but honest feedback from the world, and by accepting it with grace and an open mind, you ensure that no experience is ever wasted. You demonstrate a strength far greater than stubbornness, the strength to be wrong, to adapt, and to continually grow from every interaction, especially the difficult ones. This leads us to an 18th Stoic belief that may sound extreme, but is one of the most practical tools for building unshakable resilience: the power of voluntary discomfort. The premise is simple yet brilliant. By consciously and willingly choosing to experience small, manageable hardships in your daily life, you systematically train your mind to handle larger, unforeseen setbacks like rejection with far greater composure and strength. It's the psychological equivalent of a daily workout for your resilience muscles. When you voluntarily step into a cold shower, skip a meal, or take the harder route to work, you are not punishing yourself. You are engaging in a deliberate drill, proving to your own psyche that discomfort is not an emergency, but a temporary state that you have the power to endure and even master. The ancient Stoics were masters of this practice. They understood that a life of constant comfort creates a kind of psychological brittleness, where even a minor inconvenience can feel like a major catastrophe. To prevent this, they would regularly practice poverty, even if they were wealthy. Seneca, a man of immense fortune, would set aside days to sleep on a hard floor, wear crude clothing, and eat only stale bread. He wasn't doing this because he had to, he was doing it because he chose to. His goal was to prove to himself, through direct experience, that he could thrive without his luxuries. He wrote, "Set aside a certain number of days during which you shall be content with the scantiest and cheapest fare, with coarse and rough dress, saying to yourself the while, 'Is this the condition that I feared?'" By regularly answering no to that question, he built an inner confidence that was completely immune to the loss of external comforts. If he could handle a hard floor, he could certainly handle a social slight or a professional setback. You can apply this same principle directly to the fear of rejection through small, modern acts of voluntary discomfort. Start with something as simple as taking a cold shower for the final 30 seconds of your morning routine. In that moment, your entire body will scream in protest. Your instinct will be to leap out immediately, but if you stay, breathe through the discomfort, and observe the sensation without panicking, you are doing something far more significant than just getting clean. You are teaching your nervous system a vital lesson. You can tolerate intense discomfort and remain calm. You are in control, not your aversion to the feeling. Now translate that lesson to the moment you open a rejection email. The initial emotional cold shock will hit you, but your trained mind will know how to respond. It will recognize the feeling as a type of discomfort you have already learned to handle gracefully. Instead of reacting with panic or despair, you can breathe, observe the feeling, and let it pass, knowing you have endured far worse by choice. This practice fundamentally reframes your relationship with hardship. A rejection is an involuntary discomfort. It happens to you, and that feeling of powerlessness is a huge part of its sting. But when you have a rich history of choosing discomfort for yourself, you rewire your brain. You begin to see that all hardship, whether chosen or thrust upon you, shares a common core. It is a sensation to be experienced and managed. The person who never voluntarily faces discomfort is like a sailor who has only ever been on calm seas. The first storm will be terrifying and overwhelming. But the sailor who has trained in rough waters knows they have the skill to handle it. Your voluntary acts of discomfort are your training storms. They build the sea legs for your emotional life, allowing you to stand firm when the waves of rejection hit. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of circumstance and start seeing yourself as an active participant in your own strengthening, someone who welcomes challenges as opportunities to prove your own growing fortitude. This shift turns the experience of rejection from a demoralizing defeat into an empowering test of your training, a chance to demonstrate to yourself just how resilient you have become. This consistent practice of strengthening our resilience through voluntary discomfort prepares us to handle life's inevitable setbacks, but it also naturally leads us to a broader, more panoramic viewpoint. This brings us to our 19th Stoic belief, the profound power of focusing on the bigger picture. When we are in the midst of a painful rejection, our perspective inevitably narrows. That single no can loom so large in our immediate field of vision that it blots out everything else, feeling like a catastrophic and defining event. Stoicism offers a powerful corrective to this myopia, the conscious practice of zooming out to see our lives in their full, vast context. By remembering that any single event, no matter how sharp it feels in the moment, is merely one small thread in the immense tapestry of our entire journey, we can dramatically reduce its emotional weight and keep our focus fixed on our long-term purpose and power. The Stoics were masters of this expansive perspective. They would regularly engage in what modern thinkers might call cosmic contemplation or view from above exercises. Marcus Aurelius, for instance, would remind himself to regularly think about the whole of time and the whole of substance. He would contemplate the vastness of the universe, the countless generations that had come before him, and the innumerable people experiencing their own triumphs and tragedies at that very moment. From this cosmic vantage point, his own problems, including the betrayals and setbacks he faced as emperor, began to appear in their true proportion, significant to him, but small within the grand scheme of existence. This wasn't meant to make his life feel meaningless, but to free him from the tyranny of magnifying a single negative event. It was a tool to prevent any one rejection from derailing his entire sense of equilibrium and purpose. You can apply this same shift in perspective without needing to contemplate the cosmos. Start by simply asking a few grounding questions when rejection stings. Will this matter to me in 1 year, in 5 years? The answer is almost always a reassuring no. The specific job you didn't get, the project that was criticized, the social slight, these rarely have a lasting impact on a well-lived life. In fact, we often look back on past rejections with gratitude, realizing they steered us toward something far better. Next, place the rejection in the context of your overall progress. If you are working toward a major goal, building a career, creating a body of work, fostering a family, this single event is just one data point on a long chart. A stock market investor doesn't panic over a single day's dip if the overall trend is upward. In the same way, you must learn to see your life as a long-term investment in yourself. A rejection is a temporary dip, not a market crash. It doesn't negate all your previous growth or eliminate your future potential. This practice is incredibly effective at draining the drama and despair from a disappointing outcome. Imagine an aspiring novelist who receives their 20th rejection letter. If they focus only on that one piece of paper, they will feel like a complete failure. But if they zoom out to the bigger picture, they see something entirely different. They see 20 attempts, which represents 20 acts of courage in submitting their work. They see a manuscript that has been refined and improved with each round of feedback. They see a growing resilience that is itself a valuable achievement. The rejection letter shifts from being a verdict on their entire dream to being a single step in the long process of becoming a published author. The bigger picture doesn't eliminate the need to process the disappointment, but it surrounds that disappointment with a much larger context of ongoing effort and purpose, making it feel manageable and minor. Ultimately, maintaining this bigger picture perspective is about aligning your daily reactions with your deepest values. Your long-term purpose might be to become a wise, courageous, and compassionate person, or to contribute something meaningful to your field, or to build a life of integrity and connection. A single rejection has very little power to affect that purpose unless you allow it to. In fact, how you handle that rejection can actually advance your purpose. By choosing to see it in perspective, to learn from it, and to continue moving forward with dignity, you are actively living your values of resilience and perseverance. You are proving that your commitment to your long-term goals is far stronger than any temporary setback. This is how you build a power that is not dependent on external validation, a power that comes from knowing who you are and where you are going, and understanding that no single no can ever change that. This brings us to a 20th and perhaps one of the most transformative Stoic beliefs, the active cultivation of gratitude for challenges themselves, including the gift of rejection. While it's one thing to accept setbacks and another to learn from them, the Stoics propose we go a step further, to actually feel thankful for them. This might sound counterintuitive, even masochistic, but it is grounded in a profound understanding of human growth. The Stoics viewed every difficulty as a kind of personal trainer for the soul, a necessary force that exposes our weaknesses, tests our resolve, and ultimately forges a strength we could never develop in a life of uninterrupted ease. Gratitude in this context is not about pretending the pain doesn't exist. It's about recognizing the immense value that lies hidden within the experience, a value that often only reveals itself in hindsight. Marcus Aurelius offered a powerful frame for this, writing, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." He is essentially saying that the blocking force is, paradoxically, the very thing that propels us forward. But we can take this even further. Not only does the obstacle become the way, but we can also learn to be genuinely grateful for the obstacle itself. Why? Because without it, we would have remained on the easier, softer path, never discovering our own capacity to overcome. A rejection forces us to innovate, to reconsider our strategy, to develop a thicker skin, and to clarify what we truly want. Each no is a small death of a weaker version of ourselves, making room for a more resilient, adaptable, and powerful person to emerge. To be grateful for rejection is to acknowledge this uncomfortable but essential process of personal evolution. So how do we practically cultivate this mindset, especially when the wound is still fresh? The Stoics would suggest specific, concrete exercises. One of the most effective is to keep a rejection log or a challenge gratitude journal. This isn't a diary to wallow in self-pity, it's a strategic tool for reframing. When you experience a setback, you make a brief entry. First, you describe the event factually. Then, you ask and answer two crucial questions. What did this experience teach me? And how did this experience strengthen me? Perhaps a rejected project proposal taught you that your communication needs to be more data-driven. Maybe a painful personal rejection revealed a pattern of neediness in your attachments that you now have the opportunity to address. The act of writing this down forces your brain to search for the hidden value, actively constructing a narrative of growth from the raw material of pain. Another powerful exercise is the daily gratitude practice, but with a deliberate Stoic twist. Instead of only listing the obvious good things in your life, your health, your family, your home, make a point to include one specific challenge you are currently facing. You might say, "Today, I am grateful for the stress of this difficult project at work because it is stretching my abilities and teaching me patience." Or, "I am grateful for the anxiety I feel about this upcoming difficult conversation because it is a chance to practice courage." This doesn't magically erase the difficulty, but it changes your relationship to it. The challenge is no longer a malicious enemy to be defeated. It becomes a respected, though tough, teacher. You begin to welcome friction, understanding that just as a knife is sharpened against a rough stone, your character is honed on the rough edges of life's inevitable rejections and difficulties. By practicing this kind of gratitude, you perform a remarkable alchemy. You transform the very things that could break your spirit into the foundation of your unshakable inner fortitude. This brings us to a 21st and perhaps the most liberating Stoic belief of all, the unassailable reality of your inner freedom. No matter what happens in the external world, the job you don't get, the relationship that ends, the criticism you receive, there is one sacred space that remains forever under your sole command, your own mind. The Stoics argued that while others can control your circumstances, your body, or your reputation, they are utterly powerless to dictate your judgments, your values, or your chosen response. This inner citadel of the mind is the birthplace of true power, and every rejection, rather than diminishing it, presents a fresh opportunity to assert its sovereignty and demonstrate your absolute liberty. Think of it this way: a prison may hold your body, but it cannot imprison your thoughts unless you willingly hand over the keys. In the same manner, a rejection may limit your external options, but it has zero authority over your internal world unless you grant it that power. This is the profound distinction the Stoics drew between being harmed and feeling harmed. You are only truly harmed when you assent to the judgment that you have been harmed. If someone shouts an insult and you recognize it as mere noise, their words have no effect. The harm only occurs the moment you internalize the insult and agree with it. Rejection operates on the same principle. The no itself is just a piece of information, a data point. It only becomes a wound when you choose to interpret it as a definitive verdict on your worth. Your inner freedom is your innate power to reject that interpretation and choose a different, more empowering one. We find a breathtaking example of this principle in the life of Nelson Mandela. Imprisoned for 27 years in a tiny cell, subjected to brutal hard labor and constant humiliation, Mandela faced the most extreme form of rejection a society can impose. His captors controlled every aspect of his external reality. Yet, in his autobiography, he describes how he fiercely protected his inner world. He used his mind to study, to plan for a future South Africa, to cultivate patience, and to treat even his jailers with a dignity that confounded them. They could reject his freedom, but they could not force him to reject his own humanity or his ideals. His response, choosing discipline over despair and strategic thought over blind hatred, was a monumental act of asserting his inner freedom. He turned his physical confinement into the very stage upon which he demonstrated his unbreakable spirit. You can apply this same power to the everyday rejections you face. When you receive that disappointing email, your initial emotional reaction might be one of hurt or anger. This is natural, but the Stoic practice is to consciously insert a pause between that initial feeling and your chosen response. In that crucial space lies your entire freedom. You can choose the narrative of victimhood. This is unfair. They ruined my plans. I am a failure. Or you can choose the narrative of a free and empowered individual. This is disappointing, but it does not define me. My worth is not determined by this outcome. I choose to learn from this, to adapt, and to move forward with my dignity intact. The external event is identical, but your internal experience of it is worlds apart. By asserting your right to choose your response, you transform the rejection from a demonstration of your powerlessness into a demonstration of your ultimate control. This conscious exercise of your inner freedom is what allows you to maintain composure and grace under pressure. It's the difference between the candidate who burns bridges by sending an angry reply to a recruiter and the candidate who sends a polite thank you note expressing continued interest in future opportunities. Both received the same no, but their responses reveal a vast difference in their sense of inner liberty. One handed the keys of their emotional state over to the hiring manager. The other kept the keys firmly in their own hand, understanding that their professional demeanor and long-term reputation were far too valuable to be sacrificed to a momentary outburst. This isn't about being passive, it's about being strategically in command of yourself. You acknowledge the setback without being enslaved by it, and in doing so, you turn every external no into a resounding internal yes to your own autonomy and strength. This brings us to a 20-second Stoic belief that serves as the essential anchor in the often turbulent seas of ambition and desire. the profound virtue of patience and the wisdom of trusting in divine timing. In our modern world, which so often prizes speed, instant gratification, and rapid results, patience can feel like a passive or even weak response to rejection. But the Stoics saw it as one of the most active and powerful strengths a person can cultivate. It is not about sitting back and waiting for the world to deliver your dreams to you. It is about maintaining a steady, persistent effort while simultaneously holding the faith that things will unfold according to a rational, natural order that is often beyond our immediate understanding. Patience, in this light, is the courageous acceptance that our timeline is not the only timeline, and that a rejection now might simply mean not yet, or more importantly, not this, because something better suited is coming. The Stoic philosophers often spoke in terms of living in accordance with nature, which included accepting the natural rhythms and timing of the universe. They observed that a farmer cannot rush the harvest. He can till the soil, plant the best seeds, water the crops, and protect them from pests, but he cannot force the stalks to grow faster by pulling on them. In fact, to do so would only uproot the plant and destroy any chance of a yield. His patient, consistent work, aligned with the seasons, is what ultimately produces the abundant result. Our own endeavors are no different. We can control our preparation, our effort, and our virtuous action, the planting and the watering, but we must relinquish our frantic need to control the exact moment of the harvest. A rejection is not a barren field. It is often just a signal that the soil needs more time to nurture the seed, or that the conditions aren't quite right for this particular crop to flourish. This perspective transforms how we interpret a closed door. Instead of seeing it as a final destination, we can choose to see it as a redirection. History is filled with stories of fortunate rejections that only became visible in hindsight. The author Richard Bach's manuscript for Jonathan Livingston Seagull was rejected by 26 publishers before finally being accepted. What if he had given up after the 25th? He would have deprived the world of a book that went on to sell millions of copies. But more importantly, from a Stoic view, each of those 26 no's was not a failure. They were simply part of the necessary journey for that book. The timing wasn't right until it was. Another powerful example is the story of the actor Sidney Poitier. As a young, aspiring actor in New York, he was repeatedly told he couldn't act and was rejected from countless auditions. Rather than seeing this as a sign to quit, he interpreted it as a sign that he needed to improve his craft. He spent patient, grueling months learning to read and speak more clearly, honing his skills with relentless dedication. The rejections didn't break him, they fueled his patient persistence. When his opportunity finally arrived, he was truly ready for it, and he became a groundbreaking icon. The rejections were the redirection he needed to become the great actor he was meant to be. Cultivating this kind of patience builds a far more enduring and formidable power than any quick victory ever could. A yes that comes easily might be satisfying, but it doesn't forge resilience or deep self-knowledge. The power that comes from patient persistence is carved into your character through years of steady effort. It is a power that knows its own strength because it has been tested. It is a power that isn't shaken by temporary setbacks because it trusts in a larger process. This is the power of the oak tree that grows slowly versus the shallow-rooted plant that shoots up quickly and is just as easily knocked over by the first strong wind. When you learn to pair relentless action with patient trust, you become unstoppable. You continue to move forward, but you do so without the desperate energy of someone who needs immediate validation to feel okay. Your sense of worth and your vision are rooted in the long game, making you calm, composed, and incredibly persuasive because your energy isn't laced with neediness. You understand that the right things often take time to assemble themselves, and a rejection is merely the universe's way of clearing the path for the opportunity that is truly meant for you, arriving precisely when you are most ready to receive it. Because it is so easy to feel completely alone in our pain, especially after a deeply personal rejection. It's vital we now turn to a 23rd Stoic belief that serves as a powerful antidote to that isolation: the profound understanding of our shared humanity and the essential role of community. While Stoicism is often portrayed as a solitary pursuit of individual resilience, this is a profound misunderstanding. The philosophy is deeply rooted in the concept of sympatheia, the idea that the universe is an interconnected, rational whole, and that we, as human beings, are fundamentally social creatures designed for cooperation and mutual support. The Stoics argued that to live in accordance with nature is to live in accordance with this interconnectedness, recognizing that our own well-being is inextricably linked to the well-being of others. This belief transforms the way we view our struggles, moving us from a mindset of solitary suffering to one of shared strength. When we experience a rejection, our first instinct is often to retreat, to hide our perceived failure from the world out of shame or embarrassment. We build walls around our pain, believing we are the only ones who have ever felt this particular sting. This isolation magnifies the hurt, turning a single event into a defining and lonely tragedy. The Stoic practice of community asks us to do the exact opposite, to step out from behind those walls and share our experience. In doing so, we accomplish two incredible things. First, we immediately diminish the power of the rejection by exposing it to the light of day and realizing it is a universal human experience, not a unique personal failing. Second, we open ourselves up to receive the collective wisdom, comfort, and perspective of others who have walked a similar path. Their support doesn't erase the disappointment, but it surrounds it with a context of care that makes it infinitely more bearable. This principle is powerfully illustrated in the very way the greatest Stoic philosophers lived and wrote. Marcus Aurelius, despite being the most powerful man on earth, constantly reminded himself in his private journal that he was part of a larger human community. He wrote, "What brings no benefit to the hive brings none to the bee." He understood that his own peace was dependent on contributing to the peace and stability of the whole Roman world. Seneca, in his numerous letters to his friend Lucilius, didn't just offer abstract advice. He shared his own doubts, fears, and daily struggles. Their philosophy was not developed in a vacuum. It was refined through dialogue and mutual support. They built a community of letters, a network of minds strengthening each other against the tribulations of life. Their writings are not just instruction manuals. They are extended hands reaching across centuries, offering companionship and saying, "You are not alone in this." You can actively apply this in your own life by seeking out or creating your own modern-day Stoic community. This doesn't require finding people who label themselves as Stoics. It means finding individuals who value growth, resilience, and honest conversation. When you face a professional setback, instead of hiding it, share it with a trusted mentor or a peer group. You will often find that your story unlocks theirs, leading to a conversation filled with practical advice, shared laughter over past failures, and the profound comfort of mutual understanding. In sharing your experience of a personal rejection, you might help a friend feel less alone in their own similar struggle, turning your individual pain into a source of collective healing. This act of vulnerability is not a violation of Stoic strength. It is its ultimate expression. It takes far more courage to say, "I am hurting and I need support," than it does to pretend you are unaffected. This belief fundamentally redefines resilience. It is not a solitary fortress you build alone, but a network of support you cultivate with others. The power you gain is not just for yourself. It becomes a resource you can offer to others in their time of need. Your experience with rejection, once you have processed it and grown from it, becomes a story you can share to give someone else hope. In this way, our individual setbacks are woven into a larger tapestry of collective growth. No pain is ever wasted when it is used to comfort another person. The Stoic focus on community ensures that our journey toward inner power is not a lonely trek, but a shared expedition where we can both lean on others and offer our own shoulder. proving that our greatest strength often lies not in our independence, but in our wise and courageous interdependence. This leads us to a 24th Stoic belief that reframes rejection not as a loss, but as a form of protection, the profound power of letting go of what was never truly meant for you. This idea might seem like a simple consolation, but in Stoic practice, it is a radical and active exercise in trust and discernment. It asks us to consider that a no from the universe is often not a denial of what is good for us, but a redirection away from what is ultimately not. The Stoics believed in a rational, orderly cosmos, and part of living in accordance with that cosmos is accepting that our limited perspective cannot always see the entire path. A rejection, therefore, can be a painful but necessary course correction, closing a door that would have led us away from our true purpose, even if we were desperately trying to get it open. Think of it like this. Imagine you are a ship's captain determined to sail into a particular harbor. You've set your course, but a powerful storm blows in, forcing you to change direction and seek shelter elsewhere. In the moment, this feels like a failure. Your plan has been rejected by the sea itself. But what if you later discovered that the harbor you were so fixated on was actually filled with hidden reefs that would have torn your ship apart? The storm, which felt like an adversary, was in fact your protector. Rejection often operates in the same way. That job you didn't get, that relationship that ended, that project that was cancelled, they can feel like personal failures. But with the clarity of hindsight, we so often see that these closed doors saved us from a far greater pain. A career that would have stifled our spirit, a partnership built on insecurity, or a path that was out of alignment with our deepest values. The Stoic practice is to learn to trust that this might be true even before we have the benefit of hindsight. We see this wisdom reflected in the words of the Stoics themselves. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Accept whatever comes to you woven in the pattern of your destiny for what could more aptly fit your needs." This is not passive resignation. It is an active trust that the universe is not chaotic or malicious, but has a pattern that includes our ultimate good. Epictetus, who knew profound hardship, advised his students to not seek to have events happen as they wish, but to wish for events to happen as they do. This is the core of letting go. It is the conscious decision to release our white-knuckled grip on a specific, desired outcome and to instead embrace the reality that is presenting itself, trusting that it is part of a larger, benevolent pattern we cannot yet fully see. Letting go in this manner is an act of immense power because it liberates an enormous amount of trapped energy. Clinging to a rejected opportunity is like keeping your car in reverse while pressing the accelerator. You create a lot of noise and burn a lot of fuel, but you don't move forward. The mental and emotional energy spent on ruminating over a no, on replaying the scenario, on nursing the hurt and the grievance is energy that is utterly wasted. It is energy that is no longer available to invest in new opportunities, in creative pursuits, or in the people who truly value us. The Stoic act of letting go is the decision to put the car back in drive. It is to consciously take that invested energy back and say, "This did not work out, I accept that. I release my claim on it, and I now redirect my focus and my effort toward what is still possible." This reclamation of your own focus and effort is one of the most potent and practical forms of power you can cultivate. This process naturally fosters a deep and confident trust in the flow of life. When you consistently practice letting go, you begin to build a track record with yourself. You can look back at past rejections and see how, almost without exception, they led you to something better or saved you from something worse. This history builds a resilient faith. The next time you face a disappointment, instead of reacting with panic and despair, you can respond with a calmer, more curious attitude. You can think, "I wonder what this is making space for," or "I trust that this redirection has a purpose, even if I can't see it yet." This isn't blind optimism, it is a confidence built on the proven resilience of your own past. You stop seeing yourself as a victim of a capricious world and start seeing yourself as a capable navigator, reading the currents and adjusting your sails, trusting that the journey itself is guiding you toward your rightful destination. This trust is the foundation of a quiet, unshakable power that allows you to move through the world not with arrogance, but with the graceful confidence of someone who knows that a closed door is never the end of the road. It is simply the universe's way of pointing you toward the open one. This brings us to our 25th and final Stoic belief, one that represents the ultimate culmination of this entire journey, the profound art of transforming pain into purpose. We've explored how to reframe rejection, how to manage its sting, and how to build resilience from it. But this final principle asks us to go a step further, to actively use that pain as the very fuel for a life of meaningful contribution. The Stoics did not see suffering as something to be merely endured. They saw it as a form of raw energy, a potent kind of fuel that, when channeled correctly, could power a far more significant and impactful life. Your deepest disappointments, your sharpest rejections, are not just setbacks to recover from. They are the kindling for a fire that can warm not only you but everyone around you. This transformative process begins with a fundamental shift in the questions we ask when we experience pain. The initial, instinctual question is, why me? This question leads us down a path of self-pity and isolation. The Stoic question, however, is, what can this pain make possible? This simple but profound reframe moves you from a passive victim of circumstance to an active alchemist of your own experience. You are no longer just looking for a way to extinguish the hurt, you are now looking for a way to harness its energy. The intense frustration of a career rejection can be channeled into the focused energy needed to build a new skill or launch your own venture. The deep ache of a personal loss can be transmuted into a greater capacity for empathy, making you a more compassionate friend, partner, or counselor to others who are suffering. The pain doesn't disappear, but it is put to work. It ceases to be a weight holding you down and becomes an engine pushing you forward. We see this principle embodied in the lives of countless individuals who have turned their deepest wounds into their greatest contributions. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist and Holocaust survivor, endured unimaginable suffering in Nazi concentration camps. Rather than allowing that experience to destroy him, he used it as the foundation for his life's work, developing logotherapy, a form of psychotherapy that argues our primary drive in life is not pleasure, but the discovery and pursuit of what we find meaningful. He literally wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning from that pain, and in doing so provided a framework for millions to find purpose in their own struggles. His suffering became his credential, his source of unparalleled authority on the human capacity for resilience. He did not just survive his pain, he used it as the raw material to build a legacy of healing. You don't need to have survived a concentration camp to practice this. It operates on every scale. A parent who loses a child to a drunk driver might channel their grief into founding a non-profit organization dedicated to preventing similar tragedies. Their pain becomes the driving force behind saving countless other families from the same anguish. An artist who faces repeated rejection might use the feelings of isolation to create a deeply resonant piece of music or art that gives voice to everyone who has ever felt unseen. Their rejection becomes the source of a powerful connection with their audience. In your own life, this could look like using the frustration from a job rejection to finally start the blog you've been thinking about, sharing the lessons you're learning about resilience in real time. It could mean volunteering your time to mentor others who are navigating a similar field, using your experience to smooth their path. The key is to consciously direct the emotional energy generated by the setback outward into a creative or helpful endeavor. You are taking the arrow that was shot at you and turning it into a tool for building something new. This completes the ultimate transformation of rejection into genuine, unassailable power. A power that is not over others, but a power that radiates from within. It is the power of a person who has been tested by fire and has emerged not just intact but refined and purposeful. Your story of overcoming rejection is no longer a private shame to be hidden. It becomes your most valuable gift to the world. It becomes a beacon for others who are still in the middle of their own struggle, proof that it is possible to not only survive but to thrive. When you transform your pain into purpose, you achieve the highest Stoic ideal. You live a life of virtue that actively contributes to the common good. You become a living testament to the fact that our greatest setbacks can indeed become the source of our greatest strength, and in offering that strength to others, we find the most profound and lasting power of all. And so we arrive at the culmination of our journey, a path that has taken us through 25 distinct yet interconnected Stoic beliefs, each one a powerful tool for transforming the raw sting of rejection into a source of unshakable personal power. We began by drawing the most critical of all maps, the dichotomy of control, learning to invest our energy only in what is truly ours to command our judgments and actions, while letting external outcomes be what they are. This foundational shift allowed us to embrace the radical acceptance of Amor Fati, to love our fate completely, including every closed door and missed opportunity, understanding that these are not obstacles to our path but essential parts of it. We discovered that true success is not measured by the world's applause but by our internal virtue, the soul good, and that by focusing on process over outcome, we build a self-esteem immune to the whims of fortune. We learn to see the obstacle as the way, understanding that the barrier itself contains the very solution we seek, and we armed ourselves with the mental preparation of Premeditatio Malorum, inoculating our minds against the shock of disappointment by willingly visiting it in our imagination first. Through the daily practice of self-reflection, we turned every setback into a masterclass for growth, and by detaching from external validation, we built an inner citadel of self-reliance that no opinion can ever breach. We cultivated the present moment awareness of mindfulness to stop our minds from catastrophizing a single no into a lifelong pattern, and we found peace in the acceptance of impermanence, knowing that all things, both good and bad, are fleeting, and that the river of life is always bringing new opportunities. We practiced the virtue of justice to view the actions of others with fairness and understanding, recognizing that their decisions are rarely about us, and we summon the courage to face discomfort head-on, knowing that vulnerability is the birthplace of true strength. We used the art of negative visualization to foster a profound gratitude for all that we already have, and we simplified our desires to reduce our number of vulnerabilities, making ourselves harder to harm. We drew strength from the examples of role models who walked this path before us, and we applied the disciplined tool of rational evaluation to separate the bare facts of a situation from the painful stories we tell ourselves. We embraced the power of humility to remain open to feedback and growth, and we engaged in voluntary discomfort to train our resilience muscles daily, ensuring we are never caught off guard by life's inevitable hardships. We consistently zoomed out to see the bigger picture, preventing any single event from eclipsing our entire horizon, and we cultivated gratitude for the challenges themselves, recognizing them as our toughest but most valuable teachers. We fiercely protected our inner freedom, the sacred space where our ultimate power to choose our response resides, and we practiced the profound virtue of patience, trusting in divine timing and understanding that a no often simply means not this for something better. We found solace and strength in our shared humanity and the support of community, realizing we never have to face struggles alone, and we mastered the liberating art of letting go, trusting that a rejection is often the universe's protection from a path not meant for us. Finally, we discovered the ultimate transformation, the art of turning our pain into purpose, using the fuel of our setbacks to build a life of meaningful contribution that extends far beyond ourselves. This is the Stoic path, This is how you forge a power that is not over others, but a power that radiates from within, a power that is calm, compassionate, resilient, and entirely your own. The world will always have its rejections to offer, but you now have a choice. You can receive them as verdicts, or you can receive them as invitations. Invitations to practice courage, to deepen your wisdom, to strengthen your character, and to prove to yourself time and again that your worth is not for anyone else to give, and certainly not for anyone else to take away. So here is your call to action. Do not let these ideas remain as words on a screen. Choose one of these 25 beliefs that resonates most with a challenge you're facing right now. Practice it for a week. When you feel the sting of a no, pause and apply its principles. Then I want you to come back and share your story in the comments below. Tell us how you turned a moment of rejection into a moment of power. Your story will become part of this community's collective wisdom, inspiring others to do the same. And if you're ready to continue this journey of building unshakable resilience, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. We have so much more to explore together on the path to mastering Stoicism for everyday life. The power is not in never falling, it is in rising every single time, wiser and stronger than before. Your journey continues now. Go live it.